Good morning, everyone. So State Water Project is kind of unique in that not only do we operate all the way up in Oroville, but we have an effect in the Delta and south of the Delta with our various reservoirs. So it's this, I'm going to provide a big picture and then start focusing on Oroville. So the State Water Project, it's the largest state-built and operated multi-purpose water and power system in the U.S. It was planned, built, designed, built, operated, and maintained by the Department of Water Resources. Our primary purposes are water supply and flood control, and our secondary purposes are mainly fish and wildlife mitigation and enhancement, delta water quality and flow, recreation, and power. We do have 29 state water contractors who have long-term water supply contracts with us. They are mainly M&I, urban, and ag, with Metropolitan Water District being our largest urban contractor. So we provide all or part of our water to about 20 to 25 million California residents, and we contribute to the state's electrical grid, and since we're the fourth largest power producer, but also to the economic output of sectors of the industrial and ag. We provide water to irrigate about 750,000 acres of land. So that's a little background. You know, we start up in Oroville. We do have 3 upper feather reservoirs, Antelope, Frenchman, and Lake Davis. Water flows naturally through the Feather River, hits the Delta. We have a North Bay aqueduct that services, Benicia, Vallejo, Solano, Napa, and then we have in the Delta at Clifton Court, where we have a South Bay aqueduct that actually goes out to service folks in the South Bay, Alameda County, Santa Clara, and then it flows down the California aqueduct, splits into the coastal branch that goes through San Luis Obispo, Santa Barbara, and then continues on down where we split again into our west and east branch. So how do we operate? Well, like everyone, we always make plans. Everyone makes plans. You do it personally, you do it at work. Our plans are operational plans that incorporate forecast of both hydrology that we receive from the Division of Flood Management and the California and Nevada River Forecast Center, and our demands. And our demands are not only our contractor demands, but any demands that we have with throughout the system. It could be also our contractual obligations. So it's the demands on the system being the State Water Project. Our plans also include where we are today, where we're going. It also includes any of our regulatory requirements and our, again, I mentioned contractual obligations. It does include outages. So if Oroville or one of our reservoirs or certain aspects of our facilities have an outage, it will be included in our operational plans. We do a lot of coordination with other entities, and I'll talk more about that later in the slide presentation, but there is a lot of, our contractual obligations and our regulatory requirements. We are joined at the hip in the Delta with the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation, which they operate the Central Valley Project. So we are joined at the hip with them, but we also have our own obligations. But there's a lot of coordination with not only the Bureau of Reclamation, with fishery entities, with our contractors, and then we also look at different scenarios. What do we want to look at? What do we want to assess? What do we want to, when we're making our decisions, what do we want to incorporate in that decision-making process? So we have a lot of tools and models that we use as part of our decision-making process. And so when I talk about knobs to implement, once we've made a decision, our knobs are, reservoir increase, reservoir releases. A knob is our export facilities increasing or decreasing what we're taking in the Delta. And the last knob, and when I talk about knobs too, sometimes this is jointly with the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation, their Central Valley Project operators, because they too with Shasta and Folsom and their reservoirs. So again, reservoir operations, and then the Delta, what they can do at their facilities. But the last knob would be the Delta cross channel gates, which is owned and operated by the Bureau. And so those are the knobs that we would implement once we've made a decision. We implement 1, 2, or even all 3. It's a combination of any of those knobs. So when we talk about, that was one thing, how do we operate? Now, what do we use? Well, for the State Water Project, like I said, we have to look at a big picture. It's not like these tiny little pieces, because all of these pieces sum to a total whole. And so any decision in one area can have an effect in other areas. So we have different tools and models, and it all depends on the purpose. Are we operating for water supply? Are we operating for flood control? Are we operating, what's the purpose? And then also the timing. When is it happening? What time of year? What do we want to look at? So these tools and models, the timing could be long-term, near-term, and short-term. We do analyze and perform analysis on long-term water supply operations. What can we deliver to our contractors? Looking at different scenarios. And the timing and these models are updated on an annual basis, on a monthly basis, on a weekly basis, and daily real time, seasonally, as I mentioned, flood control and water supply. Sometimes it's in the winter time, springtime. What are we going to do during the summer and the fall? So all that plays a role in our models. And then reservoir operations. And like I said, not only Oroville, but we have operations at San Luis Reservoir, which is jointly, we have jointly with the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation, or even our southern reservoirs. We have tools and models for that, or delta operations. How much water can we export at Clifton Court? And we also have a hydrodynamic model that looks at water quality, water levels, particle track modeling for fish, all these things. And then we have regulatory requirements, and that can include our temperature requirements that we have. So we have different models, tools for, like I said, different purposes, and different places throughout our whole system. For folks, some of you may be familiar, but Oroville, this is a picture of Oroville Complex. And, a lot of people think, oh, Oroville Dam, that's it. But it's not as straightforward. What we release from Oroville is not necessarily what's coming down and being released to the river. We have contractors that take water out of the afterbay. We have flow requirements in the low flow section. So what will happen is we'll make releases out of Lake Oroville, and that could be through the Hyatt plant, that could be through the spillway, and that could be through the river valve. All of this is dependent on storage and elevation, and it's also dependent upon, sometimes we'll tap into the low level river valve in order to meet our temperature obligations in the low flow. So all of this volume of water that comes out of Lake Oroville flows, and then it can either bifurcate and go down through the power canal, through the forebay into the afterbay, or it flows down the low flow channel to meet fishery either temperature or flow requirements. And then it all joins up after the thermal afterbay river outlet. And this is the high flow channel, which is where, when we talk about river releases, this is ultimately where it's going. So this whole piece is called the complex, the Oroville Complex. And during flood control, while we may utilize the spillway and the units as much as we can, unless our releases are greater than our units capacity, a lot of it will go down the low flow channel through the diversion dam. However, we may regulate some of it through the afterbay and then release it through the river outlet. But our releases, like I said, complex releases. When we talk about Feather River releases, we're talking total, and it's the complex release. So let's talk about Lake Oroville. There's a lot of tools that we use for Lake Oroville. Kale had talked about the forecast coordinated operations tool, and we use that during the high water events. let's talk about reservoir or RES-SIM. So we do utilize it. We used it after the 2017 Oroville incident, and we do look at various scenarios, we'll run different, like, what if we do this? What if we do that? How about this release? Or if there's a limitation at the high units, and not only do we use the river forecast for the river forecast center's forecast too, is we'll look out 10 days, 30 days and beyond, and we'll look at the ensembles and see what that provides us to evaluate different scenarios. Then we have a temperature model, and it looks at both on a real-time basis, a week out, what options do we have to manage temperature. Our temperature requirements are tied to a 1983 Department of Fish and Wildlife agreement for temperature and flow, and also with we have a 2004 National Marine Fishery Biological Opinion. So we have those two requirements and our FERC license. And so we have requirements for, like I said, temperature and flow. So we have a model that utilizes our operations schedule on a monthly basis, knowing where we're taking water out. Are we using the units? Are we taking out of the river valve? Is the spillway involved? And running it through this model will give us a sense, like I said, either seasonally, like what we can expect as we go in from the spring to the summer into the fall, or even, like I said, on a real-time basis, a week out. And it will provide us and inform us with decisions on what steps we need to do. And like I said, it's a very iterative process, this temperature model. And like I said, it takes into account how we're going to run the Hyatt operations. Are we holding a flat generation? Are we peaking? What are we doing? And so all of that plays a role in when we use our temperature model. And lastly, we have what is called, and so this temperature model uses the RIMS engine, WQRS, the engine. And so that's one thing. Now, when we go into Oroville operations, that's the one I really want to talk about. And so it looks like this, and you're like, whoa. So Oroville operations, that is our daily spreadsheet based on Excel. And what it does is it takes in information. So our flood control manual has the wetness index parameter, and that is tied to how wet or how dry our basin is. And it determines what level of storage we can maintain. And then, ultimately too, it can even dictate the releases as based on the flood control manual by the U.S. Army Corps. One thing in all of these models that I do want to stress is that you need to have a knowledge of the system, not only just in Oroville, but also in the Delta and beyond. But the other thing I want to really mention too is you really need to understand the regulatory environment that we work in, live in, and how dynamic it is. And so being knowledgeable about those things also is part of the decision process, because even though the tool will provide you information, we always think about garbage in, garbage out, that sort of thing. So you have to very ensure that you're putting in the right information, and then the information you get out, it will inform you, and then from there you can go forward. So like I said, we have this wetness index parameter, and so we do get internal and external data from, say, PG&E, from CDEC internally, and that goes into this calculation spreadsheet, which feeds into our daily wetness index. We also get information on our internal, both internally and externally. So we look at storages, we look at flows, we look at what are we scheduling through Hyatt? What is the plan? Water, water is a high priority, and power is one of those byproducts. So when you think about it, sometimes, the power, they'll say we need to do this, and we'll say, okay, do we have any flexibility from a water point? Yeah, we do. Okay, that's fine. So from a power perspective, it's optimizing the schedule. And so that also feeds into this Oroville operations model. And lastly, you also have the inflow forecast that we get from both the California Nevada River Forecast Center and the Division of Flood Management. And so that's part of the inflow forecast. And like I said, this model is a daily model. And so while we do get hourly and we can make it into daily, we'll run different scenarios, constantly updating this model. And we can run, well, if the inflow's here, if the inflow's there, what are we seeing? We can incorporate real-time stuff. So it's, you know, from a flood control and a water supply, this is the model that we use. And then after incorporating all of this, it goes into our model, and it comes out with a complex operations. And so that tells us, you know, it includes forecasts and the actuals. It tells us, you know, where our storage will be, what kind of flows are necessary. We also include the contractor demands. That plays a role in what we're going to be releasing. So all of that goes into this complex operations. Now, one thing about our tools, I mean, they can act like this one can act independently, but all of our tools are integrated. I mean, what we do in Oroville has an effect in the Delta, and what we do in the Delta has an effect for those contractors south of the Delta. So all of our tools, you know, they all feed into the other models. So after we've made a decision and we'll implement it, we'll send out the order for Oroville. In all of this too, though, is this collaboration. Many agencies, you know, and it depends on, are we under flood control? Are we under water supply? Are we in the fall? Are we in the winter, the spring, the summer? What's going on? And so we have this multi-agency collaboration, communication, cooperation, and coordination, the 4 C's that you can see. And internally, it's, you know, within our shop, the Operations Control Office, which is not only the water side, but it also includes the power side, our pre-schedulers, our outage folks. I mean, because we're all water, power, and outages. And many of you may have heard, we're part of this 3-legged stool. You can't, it'd be kind of wobbly if you didn't have one of them. And so within this covers everyone in our shop. The field division, they're the ones who implement the decisions that we make. We let them know and say we need to release X. And so we'll even say, well, it will need to be released either down the low flow portion or through the river outlet. But we say this is the total we need to release, and this is where it needs to come from. Our Division of Environmental Services, actually, they underwent a new name, but these are our biologists. So there's a lot of discussions with our biologists. Hey, what do you think about going up? What do you think about going down? We have not only like in the flood management or the flood control diagram, you know, where you have ramp up rates and ramp down rates, we too have that for underwater supply. I mean, we can only go up, going up, maybe not too bad, but they'd like to have steps, but definitely going down, especially at a certain level, flow level. And they're like, ooh, because we don't want to strand and dewater certain segments of the Feather River itself. So we work a lot with our biologists, both up in Oroville and in Sacramento. And then flood management. I mean, Kale, you know, through David Rosardo's group, both for forecast of water supply, but also on inflow forecasts, the 10-day. And so we work very closely with flood management. And then of course with the Corps, especially during high water events, and the Yuba during high water events, but even through other forums, because we have an agreement, we do transfers that we interact with Yuba a lot, and through, like I said, the National Weather Service with the California Nevada River Forecast Center. So that's where I want to say biologists, engineers, managers, operators, pre-schedulers, we're all joined at the hip. We all sit at this big table. I can't say if that's me or that's you, but we all sit at this table. And as you notice, it's a round table. No one sits at the head. It's everyone has something to contribute. And so we take all of that together and we assess where we are, and then we'll make a decision. Now, that's where this, yes.
Just to wrap up, or you have 1 or 2 minutes?
perfect. I'm down to my practical last slide. So like I said, we utilize the tools. We get an info, it provides us with the results of whatever we're assessing and evaluating. We're looking at real-time conditions or conditions that are forecast to be out there, but it's mainly real-time conditions. And then we'll look at during water supply or seasonality, and then looking at this collaboration that we have with the different agencies, and it all feeds into this big operational decisions. And so that's where we go forward. And then that's it. Thank you.